right now, Jeffrey?
Yes. We will then go to the, items will be taken in order. We'll hear the item, we'll have committee discussion. We'll then go to the public for comments on that agenda item. Then we'll bring it back to committee to determine whether or not there'll be a letter or a step forward after that. I believe I've covered all the housekeeping in that regard. So with that, I'm going to move to our first item on the agenda, the update and potential vote on the Hudson River Park significant action regarding the Intrepid lease. As the committee will recall, and I'm sure many from the public, last month we were joined by folks from the Intrepid as well as Hudson River Park Trust to hear about the status of their new lease that's being negotiated. It's a 30-year term. We took that item up for 2.5 hours, and the thrust to the committee this evening would be that we had some questions that we needed answered because the items as it related to the lease were not made public in advance of that meeting, just as a matter of timeline for the significant action. Those items have since been made public. The committee was provided a letter from the trust as it relates to the lease that included a number of 11 points that referenced lease sections. I want to implore us to recognize that my suggestion this evening to the Intrepid was going to be to determine whether or not there's anything new to share. And if there wasn't anything new or updates to share, that we would have a very brief discussion of the committee, and we would wrap this into a letter based on all the things that we talked about last time and that the trust has provided to us in the interim since our last meeting. Marty, is that a good summary for you based on what you and I had talked about? Marty DeCat, my co-chair?
That's exactly what we talked about. Thank you.
Okay. So Susan, I saw you, but oh, there you've moved. Other people joined. So I want to give it over to you for a hello and to share if there's anything new or you know that's changed since last month that the committee needs to be made aware of.
First of all, I appreciate it, and hi to everybody. And technically, there's really nothing new. What we have is I have it all, everything in writing and documented for any backup that anyone might want to see as far as all of the community support that we provide. And I know the discussion has been that even inclusive of what is the capital and operational support, which is over $1 million a year that we provide as far as budget relief to the trust, that we provide tremendous value to our community, including, as a matter of fact, 28 schools and other organizations within the CB4 district and Council District 3 itself. And so I can specify those, I can outline those. As a matter of fact, one of them might have a graduation with us shortly, and we do a lot of CASA work and just a lot of things that are in the community in general. And then I also spoke about, and I don't know if everyone had heard it as well, but we do a ton of free programming, and I won't go through all of it. I mean, I have pages and pages of free programming and what their descriptions are and the constituents that they serve. And suffice it to say that they serve the underserved. It's free programming, over 148,000 people a year. In addition to that, almost 18,000 people come onto the pier for free, again, all pre-COVID, normal years. And we intend to make all of that programming free again.
I think Susan has froze for a moment. All right, it wasn't me.
To it. And that is,
It is cold now.
Pardon?
It's very cold now.
Yeah, you froze for a moment there. Just noting, you froze for a moment after normal year, all the visitors on the pier and to the museum as well.
Oh,
so
my most profound point, I froze. No. it's really, I said, the be all and end all for us is that, and anyone in our team will say this too, we've always wanted to be the backyard institution, the institution for our community that you can go to in good weather and bad weather for any purpose whatsoever, and feel like you belong. And that is our goal. And so I, again, forgive me in the order if I already said it and you heard it or if I froze, but our intent is to continue. Even in post-COVID times, you know, we've lost 95% of our revenue in this time. We're not alone. We're all on this call. We're all suffering from something due to COVID, understood. But our intent is not to stop any of that free programming. It's to continue that programming and do what we need to do so we can serve our community and all the constituents within that community. I can provide, Jeffrey, you know, I don't want to take up the floor. I think everyone's heard that. And I just want to make sure that we can provide whatever backup you all need.
Okay. Thank you. Dan, is there anything that you want to say from the trust perspective?
Yeah, why don't I just, since the issue of rent seems to be your focus, I gather. I would take it that everyone saw the letter that we provided. It's a lot of in the weeds stuff in terms of different lease provisions. If anybody has questions now or later, you know, we're available to answer them. To be clear, you know, if the trust was a private landlord, we would be charging the Intrepid rent. We did an analysis. We think the pre-COVID fair market rent, if you will, for Pier 86 is about $190,000. But because we're not a private landlord, we can take into account the benefits to the public when deciding how much and whether to charge rent. As I indicated in the letter to you, we currently have 7 tenants, not including the Intrepid, that we charge $1 a year in rent. This isn't to say that $190,000 is nothing, but let me just put it in some context and address couple of the points that were raised last month. So first off, the $190,000 is important to the trust in terms of our operations. But to address one of the things which was brought up last month, in the context of new construction, such as what was discussed at Pier 76 last year, I'm going to say it's not as important. Let me just be specific. So in these prior pre-COVID discussions regarding the development rights for Pier 76 and how big a building would have to be built, et cetera, the estimate of value per square foot was about $300 a square foot. If people were in some of those meetings, they may recall that the numbers that were being tossed about were $300 a square foot, 500,000 square feet potentially of development rights at Pier 76, yielding approximately $150 million, which roughly equaled the cost of building a brand new pier and a brand new large park at Pier 76. To put this in context, by comparison, $300 a square foot, what does that get you? How many square feet, would you have to sell for $190,000? And the answer is 633 feet. So I would say that in terms of development rights, I don't think, the Intrepid, foregoing, if you will, $190,000 of annual rent or, from the Intrepid, is going to have a significant impact with regard to generating funds for new park construction, new pier at Pier 76 or elsewhere in the park. However, that's not to say that $190,000 is not important. And let me just give you some examples. So what does $190,000 buy the park? It buys us 2 unionized maintenance workers. It buys us 1 month of dough fund cleaning in the park. It buys us 1/2 of 1 month of PEP services. So I'm not discounting $190,000, and people who know me know that, I'll spend a lot of time walking up and down the park looking for dimes, on the Esplanade, to put in the treasury. But on the other hand, I think, and we discussed this last time, the Intrepid is picking up, as Susan said, they are picking up costs. Just some concrete examples, like the cost of a pedestrian manager just during the busy weekends in the summer was about $24,000. For electric and water to clean Pier 97, it's about $20,000. If you look at the lease, you see that the pier is currently in need of some structural repairs, and Intrepid is obligated to spend approximately $225,000 in the first 2 years of the lease to do those repairs. So the other thing I think we need to focus on is Intrepid is like pre-COVID, they were an incredible generator of visitors to the park, to Pier 97. Intrepid attracts about 1 million people a year. And these are people, even if they're on their way to boarding the vessel, also go to Pier 97. So including both the people who, pay and the people who are a free admission, it's about 1 million people a year go to the Intrepid and do at least pass through or spend some time on Pier 97.
Dan, can I just correct you? You keep saying Pier 97.
Oh, my God.
You don't mean Pier 97.
Pier 86. Thank you, Noreen.
Those pesky pier numbers.
Oh, Noreen corrects me all day, so that's good. So basically, we think it's a good thing that 1 million people a year come to Hudson River Park. Yes, they're attracted by the Intrepid. We think that's good. But we also think it's good that Intrepid picks up the costs of, if you will, servicing, these 1 million visitors at Pier 86. So when you look at the all-in cost of maintaining Pier 86, thank you, when you include both the amortized capital costs and the annual operating costs, it does come to comes to over $1 million a year. And, if we were so fortunate to have a park use at Pier 86 that generated 1 million visitors a year, we would be paying about over $1 million a year to support those park costs at Pier 86 as well. So we just think it's important that the committee consider, when you're thinking about the rent, the benefits provided, by Intrepid to the community, and Susan, spoke about those. The cost that would otherwise be assumed by the trust, for open space at Pier 86, particularly if we had, such a successful operation as Intrepid has in terms of attracting people to the waterfront. And lastly, just that itself is that Intrepid is a magnet, to bring people to the Hudson River, which fulfills, part of the mission of the park. So our board, with the benefit of comments from, coming from the public hearing next week and from this committee in terms of, whatever letter you're going to send, and the full community board, these are the things, that our board is going to be judging. I think your insights and your perspective are greatly appreciated, but I just wanted to outline for you, that the trust, views the compensation, if you will, of its tenants who were not-for-profit tenants, very broadly. So I'm going to stop here. I don't want to take up any more time in the committee.
Thank you, Dan. And just to summarize where we stood last month before we go to the committee, basically the gist of applauding and thanking the Intrepid for all of the great work that they do in our backyard, in our schools, and for education as it relates to that museum and the trust. I think we specifically wanted to call out the new mentions in the lease as it relates to sort of a greenway monitor, better signage to ensure that folks know that Pier 86 is indeed public and you don't have to pay to get on the pier, you have to pay to use the museum. And those were my key sort of new call outs, that in the end though, we recognize the value given to capital consideration as it relates to the pier. But in the interest of the Hudson River Park Trust, we do feel that some rent higher than $1 and perhaps less than $190,000 is appropriate, that we are not the professionals to determine what that number should be. But given the park's restrictions on the ability to raise revenue outside of being a landlord and out of the goodness of the governor and the mayor at any given time, we feel that rent should be charged. So that was my notes as it related to last time. And I want to just emphasize that this is not meant to be, I don't think the committee feels this is an attack on the Intrepid or the Trust, that this has long been a point of discussion as it relates to how can our backyard park make as much money as possible, given the restrictions in play. And I want to frame the letter from the get-go as being thankful for the Intrepid sort of out the gate. So any comments from the committee? Alan, and then David.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So I had originally two questions: how the rental would affect the operation of the park, and I think, Dan, you, in my mind, you cleared it up that considering that you probably have to pick up some of the work on the piers and everything else, that although the money is the money and everybody's looking, to try to get as much as we can for the park, it doesn't sound to me like it's going to make a really big difference in that. And I was just wondering how it would affect the operation. I'll pass this over to Susan. How this would affect the operation if they had to start paying rent, and then maybe spending less on the pier, how that would affect their operations and all the programs that that they perform. And then I have a brief comment afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
So your first point was answered, Alan,
Yeah.
that we know what $190,000 does for the park.
Mhm.
And then Susan, what does $190,000 do? I think how I heard it is, what does $190,000 do to your bottom line at the Intrepid?
Well, I think there's two parts to that too. I think, and Alan, forgive me if I misunderstood too, but in lieu of some of that expense for the pier. And so I think that the expense for the pier has taken into account what the deterioration would be over the course of the 30 years. And so it would probably put some risk there. So not sure we can talk about it in that respect so much, but $190,000 to the bottom line of the Intrepid, it would be taking away 190 elsewhere. So whether that's programs for families with autism or programs for veterans with PTS or reducing staff or security, which would not be probably what we would be able to do or want to do, particularly in this COVID time. We're in debt. We're in a lot of debt, just like many other people are at this point in this juncture, which is going to take probably a decade to be paying back. And so again, 95% down in revenues, and I'm not speaking a sob story, just what is the fact. And so we are at our bare staffing load. We are closed right now because our winter months are typically held over by the cash flow of the summer months. And we didn't have the summer months. We didn't have any of the shoulder seasons either. And so it would be a hardship. It would absolutely be a hardship. The revenues that we bring in by earned revenue and philanthropic grants and any of our city partnerships that we competitively go after, whether it's city or state, are reinvested back into our programming to expand the free programming that we can subsidize for those in the underserved communities. It would take away from those. The other areas that are significant expenses are repairs to the actual ship. It is a 1943 National Historic Landmark artifact, and it has to be taken care of. Overhead is expensive. I mean, a cogeneration plant was probably one of the best things we did to reduce some of those expenses, but at the end of the day, the maintenance on that ship is lofty. And so it would take away from some of the programming that we bring to the community. What we do for free, we'd have to reduce. I mean, it impacts us in many different ways.
Thank you, Susan. I guess if you'll indulge me for a minute, I believe 33 million was the last last pre-COVID year of revenue that you guys had brought in. And I think you have $26 million in operating expense. So that additional still has to go back into supporting the work of the Intrepid, right? So 33 was what you brought in.
Yes, and to pay down debt.
Exactly. And then Dan, what is the operating budget of the Trust Park?
It's approximately, it's gone up and down a little bit because of COVID, but between 27 and $30 million.
So the Intrepid, okay. Thank you.
If I can just make a brief comment, Jeffrey.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. Yes, you wanted to make a comment. Sorry.
In reference to this whole question about asking for rent, I think in the past, I can't remember the committee getting involved in any new lease or lease renewal in the financial aspects of a lease. Usually it's the amenities, walkways, where the tables are going to be and that sort of thing. So I think, as you mentioned, the professionals are here in front of us. And I think in the financial aspects of how it works best for the park, that issue should be left to the professionals, and we should abide by their recommendations. And if we're going to be asking Intrepid to pay rent, then perhaps everybody else up and down the river should be paying rent. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. David?
Yeah, I'd like to start with a question. Is there any reason that the rent would be limited to $190,000?
I'm sorry, is that a question to me, or you want to ask if Susan wants?
Sure,
to give
Dan,
more
if you want to take it.
190,000? Well, we're tasked basically to charge fair value. So when if we have a request for proposals, if we have an RFP where we get multiple bids or multiple offers for a property, we might wind up getting more than fair market value because it could be very competitive. It could be a great site. But with regard to Pier 86, Pier 86 is a park pier. Pier 86 is not a park commercial pier, as is, for example, Pier 57, where the Google development occurred. So we would be limited, and we would be very difficult to have a competitive RFP process for Pier 86. So consequently, because of that, and because the uses are very limited, I would say it would be very unlikely that we would get anything more than, we would be able to ask for more than fair value, fair market value.
Yeah, it just seems that, the Intrepid isn't going anywhere. They'd have a hard time finding an alternate spot. And it may be that a much higher rent could be charged of the Intrepid. And, I hate to sound like I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth with all of the good things that they do. But it just seems that due diligence would require us to actually put number values on all of the benefits that they provide, and their income. With 1 million visitors a year. And I realize this has been a tough year, but they haven't been having their full operating costs either. And I realize that, there are other sites where you're only charging $1 a year, but, the downtown boathouse isn't bringing in 1 million visitors a year. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd really love to see something like a spreadsheet that puts a dollar number on all of the benefits that accrue to the current lease for the Intrepid versus their income. And just see if maybe it doesn't make sense to ask for more rent. I realize it's not going to cover the full cost of developing Pier 76, but everything helps. Is there any reason that we couldn't see a breakdown with numbers on it so that we've got an equation that actually balances on either side of an equal sign?
The timeline, David, is that there's a process in play here for the significant action. And we have to opine before that timeline is up, and given our calendar, that's kind of where we are right now. And this is our, second meeting on the topic.
Well, if we couldn't do a thorough breakdown of costs, could somebody spend an afternoon and look at it so we've got something to look at and have a rough sense of where we are? It just seems like,
I would venture to say, David, although, I can look at it, and I can look at Susan's, I can look at her expense, I can look at her budget, I can look at her statements. But I would venture to say, and I think Susan would agree, that the cost, the amount that the Intrepid expends for the public benefits that Susan described briefly is a multiple of $190,000. It's not an equivalence, it would be a multiple.
Very much so.
right, but we're not taking into account their income.
But our
Well-
expenses are, so we are, I'm sorry, Dan, we are a zero-based not-for-profit. And so our expenses almost reach our income. Any income over and above, any revenue over and above our net income goes back to debt that we've paid down, that we have to pay down, that we've taken out for whether it's various projects or otherwise. And so we're not swimming in profit to be able to pay rent. We are, as our mission states and as our charter states, a zero-based not-for-profit.
And David, I think, as I said last time, because we had somewhat of the similar concern, I think, of where you're headed on this, is what we proposed the Intrepid, and the Intrepid agreed, was that if and to the extent that, and Susan speaks to this, that there's any surplus generated by the operation of the Intrepid from property within Hudson River Park, Pier 86, that those funds, that surplus, has to be spent on the lease obligations, the maintenance and repair of the pier, and for programming which occurs within Hudson River Park at the pier or elsewhere within Hudson River Park. So it's not like Intrepid generates vast sums and sets up, Intrepid Las Vegas. They're obligated, under the lease to benefit the park and the community that we serve.
Okay, one final thought. If the park decides to charge more than $1 a year rent, that money could go into a different priority for the park than, say, programs for people with autism or PTSD, as worthy as those are. Has the park considered, how those benefits that the Intrepid is offering measure up against other things that could be done with rent that was charged, greater rent than the $1 a year?
Well, I'll use one example, which is, one of our priorities is environmental education. And we have a thriving environmental education program called River Project, sorry. I'm not doing well tonight. River Project. And that project and that educational program, has a cooperative relationship with Intrepid, where Intrepid participates in our educational activities. We participate in Intrepid's educational activities around the environment and the river in particular. So there is overlap. There is cooperation between the two entities. We have a common. We differ a little bit in terms of our mission, for sure. The Hudson River Park was not established, to honor, our nation's military heritage. The Intrepid was, obviously. But there are many other activities, that Intrepid undertakes, which coincides with the activities of the trust. So to your point, yes, we might de-emphasize. We might use money for an activity, other than the areas where we have activities that coincide. But we look at it, in terms of the context of our entire budget and all of our activities. We don't really pick out, the activities that coincide with Intrepid's mission and our mission. We look at our mission first and foremost, and we look to fund our mission.
Blake.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So, I'm not going to support a letter that calls for an increase in rent. And so I just wanted to make a comment as to why. It's really for two reasons. One is, I think the professionals have really done their job here, and they're accountable to the boards of these organizations who are fiduciaries of ensuring that these organizations remain viable. I opened up the lease. I did not read through it. It's a very intense document, and neither do I understand the financials of either of these organizations. I think to make a call as to whether the amounts are correct or, any more could be paid. And then the second reason is I think the point about it's a difficult time for everyone. It's a difficult time for landlords, but I think landlords should be encouraged to recognize the situation that their tenants are in. And clearly this is a tenant that's not only a nonprofit, but also one that, has not had a very good year and will take some time to get out of the crisis caused by the pandemic. And so in general, I don't think we should be supporting a landlord raising rents on their tenant, particularly a nonprofit one. So, I do agree with the elements of the letter that we support the work of both the trust and the Intrepid and encourage programming that continues to support local residents and recognize that this is an important piece of maintaining the financial viability of both of these organizations. That was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake. Sally?
Okay, thanks, Blake, because you've just said a lot of what I wanted to say. I have to say that last meeting I was moved towards that they should be charged rent, but Dan, you gave a very compelling argument tonight. You swayed me. I'd like to think that the trust knows what they're doing and that your board and your group know what's appropriate for this particular tenant and the situation. I mean, they are a magnet. They are a terrific asset to the city. You made a compelling argument on that, what that rent would do and what it would mean as compared to the contribution of the Intrepid. So I'm kind of reiterating what Blake said, and I'm kind of feeling that I'm okay with the way things are right now.
Thanks, Sally. Brett?
All right, thank you. So first, thank you for coming back. We know it's not easy, and anyone who has to come to us twice, we're not the easiest committee to work with sometimes because we are demanding and advocate hard for our community. And this isn't so specific to the issue at hand. It's just something I heard that makes me feel like I have to say something. Something that you mentioned, Dan, about how millions of people are attracted to the Hudson River Park by the millions, and this is a lot like the High Line. So we were very happy and worked hard actually as a community, those that have been on the board longer than I have, to bring the High Line to our neighborhood. And when they opened, lo and behold, we had people coming from around the world to come to our park that we helped create in our backyard, to the point we felt kind of crowded out. I think it's very important for I think the trust to really understand part of where we kind of get off sounding like we're not appreciative of what we have in our backyard is because our agendas might be different. From our perspective, at least I can speak for myself, access to open space and daylight is really a necessity to our community. The quality of life and health of our neighbors is a big part of what our committee is advocating for. So we really do like and even take pride in having the Intrepid in our backyard. It is like a way cool thing to have. There's no doubt about that. We also appreciate the Intrepid gives back to our community, provides free programs to us, as has been pointed out. But where we might sound a little bit unappreciative is drawing millions to this park in our backyard really is not something that gets us excited. In fact, sometimes it makes us feel a little bit crowded out of what's a limited resource, this access to daylight and open space. We understand it's part of living here, but abating that, putting that person in the crosswalk so we can ride our bikes and our bike path in our backyard, that's like a minimum that needs to be done just so we can actually have this park space. Otherwise, those millions become more of a nuisance than than what you see as an asset. So I think it's just important it's important to me to point that out. And I know that you work hard looking for all those nickels and dimes to keep what is my favorite park in the whole city up and vibrant. So I don't want to sound like just complaining here, but part of the disconnect I think we might be having with this whole rent issue and everything might be related somewhat to that issue. So thank you for your patience and be pointing that out.
Thank you, Brett. Leslie?
Thanks, Jeffrey. Dan, I'm so glad you're here tonight. Just knowing you, knowing your position, and just knowing your experience, I really value what you had to say. And I just want to make a point that I think everyone is getting caught up on this $1 rent on paper. But Dan, please correct me if I'm wrong. They're not paying that. This is not in a vacuum. They're paying it in other ways, right? I mean, it's not just $1 rent and that's it. They're giving back and they're paying double or whatever. I don't want to say tenfold. I'm exaggerating, but they're paying that back in other ways. again, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but you coming here tonight and just knowing kind of what the Hudson River Park Trust position is on this, if not necessarily official, at least some sort of advisory way. I'm going to agree with Blake and Sally as well, that I wouldn't want to get caught up on a number on a piece of paper and ignore what they're giving back in other ways, both financially, both educationally, and both in terms of programming. And the reason why I keep saying Dan is because I'm kind of deferring to you slightly, because I know you're in this 24/7. So if there's anything I said, Dan, that was inaccurate, or if you had anything to add to that, that would help, please go ahead. But
I don't think there's anything else to add.
No, just simply that you're quite right in that it's not my decision. It's not Noreen's decision. You know, we put the information together. We have the benefit of the public hearing. We solicit comments from not only you, but from others. And, you know, we provided to our board, they're the decision maker, and they'll consider this and render their decision on March 25th.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Dan. So, Marty, do you want to add anything to this? If not, I'm going to make 2 comments and then call for a motion. Okay, thank you. In a matter of time, our community district is going to be asked to tolerate several hundreds of thousands of square feet so that we can build more park space in our backyard. We're going to be asked a lot in that regard so that the trust can make money to pay for more park space. So if we expect that $190,000 or $80,000 each time doesn't add up to a lot, I really wonder what our position is going to be when we're confronted with tolerating development in our park to sustain the park. So I value the idea that, you know, in this case, the Intrepid is a worthwhile, important community, municipal, national asset. I'm going to take the macro view here and note that this will not be the last time we hear about a financial need of or from the trust, and that our district alone not only funds the majority of the park, but also has the most development left to take place in it outside of Pier 40. We have Upland behind Javits, we've got 76, all really exciting things, but we're going to have to tolerate development to make it happen. So I leave that as my final comment and wonder if there's a motion that we can get to on this to send to the trust for the public comment period. I can't make the motion.
I think you have an attendee. You have an attendee who wants to say something.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's still somebody who wanted to speak on this.
Yes. I'm going to time folks this evening, everybody. It's not our standard protocol, but we're already 45 minutes on this item. That went 2.5 hours last month. And we do have a significant Parks Department update to hear from, as well as another item after that. So Graham.
Does that need to be seconded or a motion need to be made on timing public? What's Robert rules?
Order of the meeting is discretion of the chair.
Copy that, thank you.
Public session, you know, that we have at our meetings. So members of the public, I'm happy to give 2 minutes to.
Hey.
Graham, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Hi, Graham Birchall here, Downtown Boathouse. And of course, I'm going to support the $1 a year rent, but I want to provide some background. Some things came up. For instance, Brett's comment about how bringing tourists to the park doesn't always benefit the neighborhood. It is actually the primary complaint that the Downtown Boathouse gets from the community board in Lower Manhattan. We get overwhelmed with tourists, and therefore there's no space for locals to come and go kayaking. And for David's comment, we serve 30,000 people a year, but we could probably serve 300,000 people a year if we had the capacity. Because Noreen's on, I'd love to have a beach. That would get me there. I'm not going to get there any other way. So as we build urban parks, we all face this dilemma, right? We get the better the park, the more tourists come, the more it affects the local community. And I think you'll find that both the Intrepid, the Downtown Boathouse, and other tenants in Hudson River Park are very aware of this problem, right, and working on this problem. right? So you really should take note of that, and you should challenge them on that, right, as Brett did. But maybe like in the off season, if there was prices more affordable for local community residents, that would benefit both the Intrepid and both the community. Just something to put out there. The last comment I'll make is like, no one's talking about the value of history, and that's what the Intrepid serves the public with, right? We are living in historical times, right? And the lack of knowledge about history is part of what has made the last couple of months in this country so interesting, right? The Intrepid provides history, right? Important American history in this community. It in itself is a valuable contribution, right? Especially in these difficult times. And it's something to consider. Thank you.
With 2 seconds to spare, Mr. Birchall, thank you very much for that. Any other members of the public? I apologize for not noticing that hand up, everybody. I don't see any. Okay.
I do have a question, Jeffrey.
Sure.
Based on your comments, your 2 points, I want to know more about the development that we're going to see in our neighborhood within the next 5 to 10 years that you're speaking of, because I think we need context beyond what you said. Just personally and for everyone else. Thank you.
The context is that, if I'm not, and I think Noreen is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the legislation in the Hudson River Park Act says that Pier 76 shall have no more than 50% development to accommodate the other 50% and pay for the other 50% of open space. Now,
and Pier 76 is the former lot run by the NYPD. Thank you.
Correct. So we'll be confronted with the decision of how much, park space do we want and how much development can we tolerate to pay for that park space, and the park as a whole as well. It's a macro view.
So macro into micro, were there other areas of the park that were slated for potential development that were nixed? Any plans for development were nixed, where that would have fed into the trust's funds?
I was referring to commercial development, of which there's very specific areas in the park where that's allowed. But commercial development is where, the revenue comes from, sustained revenue comes from to help our park in a major way. So Pier 76 is sort of the next big one for us to deal with.
And in the history of the park, and in the last 5 years of this board, Jeffrey, Pier 40, which is not within the purview of CB4, at one point was slated for development that would have fed into the funding of Hudson River Park. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the crux of your argument and bringing this up 2 months in a row is not only the onus of paying the dues into Hudson River Park fall onto CB4, but other community boards have failed to do so or have used other political movements to prevent commercial development. And so everything falls back onto us. Yes?
Well, I would just say that the majority of the revenue, is my understanding, comes from Community District 4. But, like you said, Chris, we aren't going to opine specifically on Pier 40 or, stuff south of 14th Street, basically.
Right. Yeah. So could I just jump into, so Community Board 4 obviously starts at 14th Street and goes to our northern boundary at 59th Street. The majority of the piers that are allowed to have what are called park commercial uses in the Hudson River Park Act are located in Community Board 4. So Circle Line, Pier 57, Pier 98, those are sites that are generating income right now for the park.
And the largest one is Chelsea Piers.
Right, Chelsea Piers.
Our largest revenue generator is Chelsea Piers.
Pier 40 does generate a lot of revenue for the park, but it is not solving the overall picture for the park the way we believe it should be solving the overall picture for the park. And that's why we have been, we've in the past sought legislative changes so that we could do something different than the large parking garage that's here. But, basically what Jeffrey says is correct. CB4's boundaries generate the majority of income for the park.
Noreen, by the way, hi, Happy New Year. It's nice to see you. I know I should have said that last month, but
And
I apologize.
if I may jump
2021 is
in,
crazy. But
just
hold on, David. So it's just a chain of things, and I'm really appreciative of both Dan and Noreen jumping in to provide context and clarity. What is going on, legislatively speaking, currently in this session in Albany to correct
Chris,
the funding of the park?
that is out of order on the agenda item. So I want to keep it very specific to the item at hand.
I'll pull back that question. Thank you.
There'll be many. I'm sure there's going to be times that we can talk about legislation as it relates to the trust, as there usually is each year. But if we can try to keep it on topic, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
I yield.
David, you had a comment, and I'm also fishing for a motion, pun intended.
Okay, just to fully respond to Chris's earliest concern, it shouldn't be forgotten that Hudson River Park has raised the possibility of building office buildings on Pier 76 as part of their commercial development.
So I just want to confirm, slightly related to what Chris just said as well, that right now, we're not proposing anything. The interim use at Pier 76 is for public open space. We would need a legislative change and a lot of work. We have not proposed anything at this point for any such change. But David is right that prior to COVID, we're in the middle of a coordinated planning process with Community Board 4, N2, N1, and our elected officials about trying to figure out how Pier 40 and Pier 76 could jointly work together to provide better and more open space as well as more revenue for the park. So we were not proposing an office use. I want to make that clear yet. It was one of the things being explored. And who knows post-COVID what will work. But, I'm not implying that at some point we won't be seeking to have a commercial use on probably about 50% of Pier 76 to help pay for the overall care of the park.
The key being that 76 is an identified pier for potential revenue and development, and that's why it continues in our discussion here. Anything else? And anybody can make a motion in favor of the proposal from the trust. It doesn't need a motion to move this forward, of which it would be really helpful to do. Frankly, I think we need to take a vote on something. So if somebody could make the motion, and then Alan.
A motion to accept the trust recommendations on this lease.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we would be supporting $1 a year in rent, as well as all the new accommodations to the lease,
Correct.
which I outlined earlier.
Could you list the new accommodations so that we understand what would be going into the letter?
I think the two key ones that we were excited to call out and very much appreciated were sort of a greenway monitor and a pedestrian monitor at the intersection of the highway, the greenway, and Pier 86. And then better signage and design and promotion of the fact that Pier 86 is a public pier. Admission is required for the museum entry, but not required for, access to the pier.
Jeffrey, would you like me to read them?
I mean, there's 11 of them. I'm really trying to be, they're in the Dropbox folder.
In the Dropbox.
We're going on hour 3
Right.
and a half of this for this item.
Right.
A motion has been made and been seconded. So all in favor of the motion posed right now, and I need hands up because I think there's gonna have to be a count here.
Motion to make this vote roll call vote.
That is an excellent recommendation, Mr. LeBron. So I'm going to do it as I see people on the screen. Alan.
Aye. As they say in Congress.
David.
Nay.
Blake.
Aye.
Sally.
Aye.
Brett.
No.
Tina.
Sorry about the delay. Abstain.
Let's see, Marty?
I'm not going to abstain. I am going to vote in favor of the motion, but I'd like to see the letter say that we include language that says that we found it difficult for the $1 and that it was not explained the kind of interactions that Park has with the Intrepid has with the trust, and that needs to be part of our letter.
Leslie?
Yes, I support the trust recommendations.
Colin?
Yes.
Chris?
I vote aye, and I look forward to this conversation on the pier development at 76.
Sarah?
Aye, and we'll second Chris.
Oh, Brett, you're on here twice. And the chair votes nay. So the motion carries 8 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative, 1 abstention. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the trust. Thank you, Susan, for being here again. So moving on. New York City Parks Department, a whole other park that we're to talk about tonight. Let's see, Steve, I know you're here and you have a team as well.
Yeah, I should have about 5 reinforcements.
As you know, you need them here.
Yes, yeah, I'm well aware. Yeah, Brett, I would like to point out to you that this is probably our 3rd time before the committee on this project. So I think we may have outdone Hudson River Park. Although I do want to say hello to my brethren from Hudson River Park. I don't mean to cast any aspersions. But this is our 3rd opportunity to talk to you about this project, the DEP site on 10th Avenue between 48th and 49th Streets, which we will be developing as open space available to the community. You'll recall that we went through an evolving process with the design of this park, and you gave us numerous suggestions and comments about how we could change the design, and I believe that we adopted the majority, if not most of them. So this design has progressed. It's been accepted by the Public Design Commission, but it did have to be tweaked a little bit following the PDC approval because of conditions that were determined afterwards. We had to make sure that our property would meet with the HPD building next door, which is providing us with bathrooms. And you'll see that we made a slight adjustment there. And we also made a slight adjustment to the spray shower, which I think is also consistent with some of the comments that we received from the board. So I'm joined by Leslie Peoples, who is the Director of Landscape Design for Manhattan at the Parks Department. Alex Zervos, landscape architect. He's pinch hitting for Alan Scholl, whom you've seen in the past. George Bloomer, our senior landscape architect, is also on the call. Nick Molinari, our chief of planning and neighborhood development. Alicia West, who is the director of public design outreach for the Department of Environmental Protection. And my name is Steve Simon. I'm the Manhattan chief of staff at the Parks Department. So I'd now like to be able to introduce Alex Zervos to give you a brief presentation on the latest changes which were made to the design, which you previously saw.
So I guess I'll start by saying if everyone can hear me okay. All right, I just wanted to introduce, I'm Alex Zervos. I'm a landscape architect at New York City Parks. I've been involved with 2 other sites that are similar to this one, along with DEP and Alicia. And so I'm pitch hitting for Alan tonight. What's the best, should I share a screen, Jeffrey?
Did you share the presentation already? Janine, do you have it?
I don't have a copy of the presentation.
Okay, so we would need to, we don't allow share screen outside of our board staff. So if you, Janine, maybe can you drop your email in the chat? How do we?
I can send it to her.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. By Steve walking away, it made me think that he's literally going to try to send it, but it's an email, so we'll give that a minute to happen.
Yeah, apologies. I wasn't sure. I think
okay.
Steve is sort of the gatekeeper, so I'm sure he's going to forward it right away.
Should have reminded him. It's been actually the last time we had this, if I'm not mistaken, it was the committee's last in-person. It was February of 2020, I believe, was the last we heard of this. And it was our last in-person meeting,
Wow.
I believe, as the committee.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's a year has passed. It's surprising.
Yeah. That was upstairs in Fountain House. Yeah, in Fountain House, I believe.
That's when JD was still on, remember? And he was talking about
the committee.
Yeah.
What is our? Did anybody have new business? Always, Mr. Oster, always.
This is not about helicopters. Since we do have the park here, I was thinking maybe at some point in time going down the next couple of months, perhaps we can get some presentation as to what the procedures are for folks to come into the parks to offer various arts exhibits and things like that. Because I've gotten some feedback, and it seems to be a little complicated for folks to navigate the website, and maybe we can encourage some of our local community groups to get into the parks with some cultural, artistic presentations and exhibits. New business.
Thanks, Alan. All right, Parks Department, your show.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to thank everyone for joining this evening. It's a fairly brief presentation, but as Steve started off, we did come to the community board last year, and we received the letter with the approval, and we went to the Public Design Commission as well with approval. During that time, there have been 2 minor tweaks, revisions to the design. And Janine, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. This slide's just a refresher of where the design was when it was seen and approved last year. The big design programs and gestures on the design were the synthetic turf area, the plaza itself, the water spray area, and a planted buffer around the site. And as many of you know, the coordination with DEP to still provide them access to the site because of their existing structures, and trying to create an open space that's as green, as lush as possible with amenities for the public. And the next slide, Janine. Okay, so the first revision to the site, this was during coordination with the new development to the west of the site via planning and HPD. There was a tweak. The proposed restrooms that are going to be provided by the new development for patrons and to visitors of the site, the grade differential required us to revisit that area and propose a new staircase and a ramp for accessibility to the public. The circular planter that was proposed there previously is now more of an oblong rectangular shape, but the seating that was there is still intact. So the minor tweak were these stairs and ramp in order to provide access to the restrooms that are down below that'll be accessible to the public. Next slide, please. The second tweak was, and it's in line with the letter that was from the community board, was the water area. I think in the letter it had said that it felt a little bit too much like a children's play area. And in order to also give accessibility throughout the year, the vertical elements that were proposed previously, they're now in-ground spray jets that when the water shut off, that area can be accessible during the cooler months in the fall and the winter for the public to use, and sort of be more of a spill out space of the open area there. Next slide, please. These next slides are going to show the previous rendering of those vertical elements. So that was when that was the previous iteration. And the next slide, please. You can see they're now in-ground spray jets that, again, when the water's turned off, that area will be more accessible to the public in the cooler months. They're not just sort of a no zone, but more of a opportunity for either outdoor space or event space. And then the next slide is, again, should be the schematic plan, the revision, just showing the two minor tweaks, and overall the plan sort of kept intact with the planting areas, et cetera. Those were the two revisions. In terms of schedule, we did want to come to the community board and just sort of with an update. The design team, we're looking to complete the construction drawings by the end of July of this year. Following that, the project will then go into the typical procurement process that includes bidding.
Well, actually, Alex, before you go there.
Go ahead, Steve.
I mean, there are all sorts of discussions going on about the best way for us to handle the construction. I wonder, maybe Nick should join in at this point.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick from the planning office at Parks. So we're coordinating.
No. You're the chief of the planning office.
Chief of the planning office. We're coordinating this project with the Hudson development immediately adjacent. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what their potential staging needs might be here. I think they may need to do some staging within this area of the park, or of the open space. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what their needs will be and how that may impact our timeline. We don't have a very clear answer yet on the schedule for their development project and exactly which areas of the site they may need. We're trying to figure out what the most efficient approach here is to get the open space and housing built with minimal impact to the community in terms of constant construction. But we don't have a very clear answer yet on that.
All right. Well, I think I think that's our update.
That is the update. Those two revisions.
Right. I mean, Alex is working on the construction drawings in any case, and you're telling me that you expect to finish them by the end of July.
Yeah, we're anticipating, Steve, with coordination with DEP and then getting a final PDC approval. We're anticipating to be done, scheduled for the end of July of this year.
All right.
So construction drawings, construction documents, you said?
Correct,
yes.
Jeffrey, yes.
And is bidding simultaneous to that or no?
No, the bidding would normally be subsequent to that. But again, we need to have further discussion with HPD and a developer to figure out how this is going to pan out and what's the best way to do this.
Ginny, could we stop screen sharing? So I mean, do you guys have any other slides so we can go into conversation and see faces? Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Thank you for that. This is a long-awaited park. I found a letter from when I was working in Dick Godfrey's office that Tom Duane wrote in 1997 when he was a council member about advocating for this to become a park. So this is extraordinary to see this happening.
Jeffrey, if I could just correct you, and I don't want you to get us into trouble. We're not referring to it as a park. It's open space.
Open.
Yeah, because the DEP will continue to own the property. It will be managed by the Parks Department. It will not be officially mapped as parkland. It will always remain under DEP's control. So technically, it's not a park.
Thank you, Mr. Simon, for this extraordinary open space.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I don't want Alicia to bite off my head.
You're safe, Steve.
Alicia, can you just before I go to Alan, just on DEP operations here, I mean, that water tunnel shaft access site is not going away. Is there anything, you want to share just that we can be familiar with? What does standard operations look like emergency needs aside? How often is DEP going to be on site?
So it does vary, but I would say that they're probably there weekly, and they're bringing in usually a truck, and then they'll access the various hatches. They have a safety protocol for setting up sort of little yellow fences around the hatch as they go in. And yeah, I don't think it's tremendously disruptive when they do it. And they're doing it at all of our sites. We have a lot of water infrastructure that's just in the public right of way. So they do that kind of thing all the time, all over the city.
And the park will, the open space will, other parts will remain accessible and usable by the public when DEP is doing its standard visits, maintenance, operation, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we're basically only going to be on the southern end of the site. And you'll see there's sort of a paved pathway to make sure that our operations vehicles aren't crushing any landscaping. And we really, Parks will tell you that we fought for every inch of green space here. And it was very difficult, and our operators were very flexible, more flexible than they're usually comfortable being. So we're very thankful for their willingness to work with us to make this a truly workable open space for the community.
Great, thank you. Alan.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And I think the Historical Society might be interested in having your letter. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for your team. Looks like a great plan. Thanks for all your hard work. Quick question about the steps on the west side leading to the restrooms. Do you really need the steps there? Is there a possibility of a tripping hazard? People coming out of the waterway, wet feet, wet sandals, stuff like that. Can you just make it another ramp?
We have the ramp for accessibility, but we do propose the stairs. There are 4 risers going down just to give the option coming in and out of the restroom that's there. So we do have, there will be a handrail, and the steps will follow typical construction protocol from Parks Department to minimize any slipping, et cetera, that's there. But we do have the 4 risers and sort of alternatively give the ramp option just so there is an option. And just because the ramp does take up more space there, we have the ramp on the one end and then the stairs just to minimize the impact, because we do only have so much green space on the site. The stairs just help accomplish that. And honestly, with the grade change, we are able to put somewhat of a cheek wall and create sort of a planting bed coming down into the restroom area. So it should accomplish what we're trying to do there, and also maximize green space and not have to create another ramp that then will sort of take up more of a footprint on the site. But it's a great question. It's a great question.
Thanks, Alan. David?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on Alan's point, and I did hear what you just said, Alex. If you can get rid of both the ramp and the stair, I think that would be terrific. And what I'm proposing is actually a sloped walk at 5%. I mean, a ramp is 8%. And if you can simply have a sloped grade or walk, that doesn't even require the handrail or the textured surface that a ramp requires. And it honors universal design, where all people get where they're going regardless of their physical status. And stairs are a tripping hazard. If you can avoid them at all, that's great. And it doesn't seem like it would be such a huge impact on the green space in the park.
Alex, isn't the ramp at 5%?
The ramp itself, I'll double check the percent, but just to clarify, in order to achieve the, I haven't looked at it close enough, but in order to achieve the 5%, again, it would take up more of a substantial footprint on the site to create the walk across there to get down. It's about, I think it's about from 3 or 4 feet going down into that restroom area to get down into the restrooms. So in order to achieve the 5%, it would just require more of a footprint on the site. And I agree with you. It would be ideal to get a 5%. It wouldn't be a ramp. It would qualify as a walkway. It just would require more of a footprint. And because I think of the overlap with the structures beneath, it becomes a little bit of a trickier situation to make sure that we're not sort of encroaching on the structures or any accessibility to those. But it's something to.
That is something that we did look at the beginning. Because of the DEP structures, we worked with their engineers. We can't take that much fill off of the top of the site to actually achieve just a sloped walkway. That is the reason for the stairs. Yeah.
Okay.
And the ramp.
And I seem to recall that one of the reasons you can't have trees sort of in the middle of this has to do with the DEP structures, right?
Correct.
That's
correct. Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you can sort of around the perimeter allow for larger trees, but this is sort of a low-rise environment. The buildings to the south aren't very tall, so any shade, extra shade that you can get in there for the summertime is going to help the use of the park. And also, you know, your railings and fences and such, what material are they?
They're typically steel. It'll be steel handrails, steel fencing with finishes above them. Follow again standard parks protocol.
Painted
Black,
steel.
Painted steel, correct.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if you could make them stainless, you know, the trouble with painted steel is after their first winter they start rusting.
I know that the fences will be black steel, and then we're looking at I don't know if you remember the seating with the umbrellas. So that'll be we're looking to powder coated, so that will have a powder coated shop finish from the manufacturer, and then the fences themselves and the handrails will follow like a park standard black, which will help with maintenance as well, because DEP will own the property, but parks will follow through with maintenance on the site. So it will help as well with sort of the maintenance of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. My question was also, or I had two questions, one of which was on the bathrooms, and the question was related to the drainage in that restroom area. You know, if it is at a lower elevation than the rest of the park, you know, how are we thinking about drainage, you know, both for things like snow not, you know, piling up in that area, as well as water, you know, when it rains hard?
So we're actually, it's a great question. We're doing the construction documentation and coordinating with parks engineers that then will subsequently coordinate with DEP's engineers to make sure that any catch basins or drainage that we're proposing, you know, not only fulfill not overlapping with their structure, but are draining the site appropriately. So we'll have, you know, we will have catch basins and sewers to drain the site. And then additionally, which is sort of a great feature of this site and other sites like them, there is substantial permeable pavers on the site. You know, the site's currently gravel, so it's just discharging back down. And we did try to ensure that as much as that porosity is still being intact on the site. But in terms of things like, you know, when there is sort of an overflow, et cetera, there will be a structured catch basin to the site as well. So we're in the process of coordinating with our civil engineers on that, and as well as the water supply that's going to feed things like the drinking fountains and the you know, the RPZ, et cetera, on the site. So we're doing that as we speak with the construction documentation. I know there are some drains being proposed in that area, and we're trying to minimize, you know, typically how they're seen, but also, you know, make sure they're functioning appropriately.
Got it. Thank you. And just my other question was, if you could talk about the trash and recycling cans within the park, as well as what the plan is to empty them. You know, I think there's just been district-wide some issues with cans not getting emptied. You know, so are there going to be trash and recycling in the park? And, you know, if so, who's responsible for maintaining that?
So parks will, with any of these sites, including this one, parks will maintain the site. We have proposed for this site the solar compactor, the commingle. So that'll work. That they sort of look like I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. They're sort of like a box, and you see them. They're around like the Natural History Museum. They're prominent sort of around the city in many city parks. And so
massive.
Yeah, so those will get compacted. And so the idea is that they don't necessarily have to be emptied as much, but then they also will minimize sort of the overflow that you'll see coming out of the can. And I know I've heard that sometimes there's a handle to them, but there's a foot pedal. And so you press on the foot pedal, it opens and you throw your trash away. And then it has a solar compactor element to it it's a commingle. So there's a trash and then there's a recycling directly next to it. And so we have a few of those around the site in areas where around seating or sort of in areas where you might have somebody eating, like especially near the tables, and they could throw their trash away.
Alex, make sure that you put into the specs that they have to have the decal pointing out the foot pedal on the bottom.
Absolutely.
But in answer to your question, our regular M&O staff will be checking on and cleaning the park on a daily basis, 7 days a week. And they'll be checking to see whether or not these what are known as big belly trash receptacles, whether or not they're full and need to be emptied.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Oh, wow. So this is a really fun opportunity. I'm really glad to see you guys back after a year. And I have last year's meeting so fresh in my mind. I wish JD was here to do justice to the notes that we called on last year. First question, the iron fencing. How high is it? Because you just said it's not a park. Ergo, standards for park should not be applicable. How high is the outlining fencing?
The perimeter fencing for the site is 5 feet tall.
We did not ask for 5 feet. We wrote that in the letter, it was captured in the letter. The adjoining park, Hell's Kitchen Park, is at 8 feet or 7 feet.
So
Once again, it's excuse me, it's not a park.
Chris, she was answering.
No.
I'm sorry.
I just want to go back. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that in this presentation, we pointed out, this is not a park. It's only a park managed by parks, owned by DEP. So the standard protocol for perimeter fencing should not be applicable. And we did write a letter asking for the perimeter fencing to be higher than a standard for New York City parks. That's question one. So I want to understand why you came back to us with a 5-foot fence.
I'll answer that one. Alicia West from DEP. So the 5-foot fence is the standard that we've established for each of these shop site open spaces. We have 4 of them in Manhattan. So they will all have a 5-foot high fence.
Okay, so both parks and DEP have coincidentally through 4 sites decided that 5 feet would be the standard, but that's also the standard for DEP. Am I right? I mean, for parks, am I right? Or is it 3 feet?
It's actually 4. It's actually 4 feet.
Okay, so we only got up.
Our Parks
so
Without
unless-
Borders is 4 feet, but DEP has asked us to raise it to 5 feet. So that
Okay.
is
Okay.
all of their open space sites.
And everyone here had read the letter, and we understand what's going on in Hell's Kitchen and what's been going on in Hell's Kitchen well before COVID, which is that we are suffering directly from the opioid epidemic here in the country. Everyone knows that. And so that was the logic to asking for a higher fence. So what we want to make sure is that overnight, this respite, this green space is not used by drug dealers to lure people in to poison them with opioids. We don't need that. I lived through that. Okay, so I'm going to push that point. We asked for a higher fence because we're not like most neighborhoods. In many cases, we're actually called the nameless neighborhood. We've gone through enough. Please use your heart to get outside of the norm for Hell's Kitchen. 2, the space for the use of collection of equipment that parks would have access to. I have no anticipation of sanitation's budget being returned to normal until 23 or 24 or 25. We do have a beautiful group of people throughout the entire council district working their butts off, and in the CB as well, working their butts off to keep our streets clean. And they've been cleaning your DEP site. Across the street at Hell's Kitchen Park, gardeners are allowed to keep equipment there. Will our sidewalk cleaners, our street cleaners, our volunteers be allowed for the foreseeable future to keep their cleaning equipment at the park space, at this green space? That's all.
So when you, just to clarify, when you say, Chris, are you meaning for the future when the park is, or the open space eventually opens?
So yes, so
okay.
I'm a realist. You know, I don't anticipate this to be done until 24. Maybe I get pushed back,
Understood.
but I don't see sanitation's budget being completely restored to 2020 standards for another 5 years.
So we have, I know,
and there's someone in the audience right now who's spearheading this movement, and she's been spearheading this movement since May or June. And I just want to make sure that her volunteers that she's activated, as well as other groups potentially that are to be activated, have the opportunity to keep our sidewalks cleaned.
So I know that,
that's all.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know that on the site, we've been coordinating with DEP. There is a proposed there's a storage bin that's being proposed. They're quite big. They're steel storage bins that you might see on some of the sites. So I know that we've coordinated a location because of that, in order for supplies to be stored inside of it. It's a substantial steel storage bin, and we're happy to even to share it with the community to see it. That is the intent of it, and to store supplies inside of it for the future, for maintenance, etc. So I do remember that coming up previously. I heard about it, and I do see we have that incorporated in the set that we're putting together and coordinating with DEP. To answer your question,
the intent though is
just please be mindful of that long term. That's all. Please be long term.
I would just like to clarify that the intent is that it will be used by park volunteers, which was a specific request we received from the board.
So since there is no park on that site and it's a green space, are we speaking of Hell's Kitchen Park?
We're speaking about this location. I wouldn't tell people from Hell's Kitchen they can't use it, but the request we had from Board 4 was that we allow volunteers to also attend some of the greenery in this space.
Fantastic. So in this case, I know for a fact that this volunteer organization has been cleaning the DEP site throughout the pandemic. And so I would like them to be rolled into that definition. Thank you.
Well, we would certainly be happy to meet with them and talk to them. We could use all the volunteers we can get.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee before I go to Elka and Katie? All right, Jean, if we could bring Elka and Katie over. Elka, I'm gonna start with you as our steward of the block 4748th Street Block Association and a longtime advocate for this open space. Elka, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Okay, not only an advocate, we were here before it was even empty. It was still a car lot. So sure. Yes, along with Tom Drain and everybody else, we've been along this road all these years. Thank you very much to Parks. Glad that we're to this juncture. We have a little ways to go. Thank you, DEP. DEP has worked tirelessly, because I seem to remember when we first started this, you were only allotting like half of that lot for open space, AKA green space, AKA park. And so thank you very much. Steve, I promise I did not talk to Chris LeBron before, but that fence height is something that this community has been complaining about forever. 5 feet is not something that is safe in this neighborhood. We've learned we have learned sorry about that. We have learned our lesson with Hell's Kitchen Park that 5.
Elka, are you? I think
Elka was receiving a landline call, which is rare in our days, so she should be back.
Thank you, Chris. She's not muted. So, Katie, while we wait for the return of Elka.
Hi, my name's Katie Savage. And like Elka said, I promise I did not ask Chris to mention those things. I'm the founder of the Hell's Kitchen Litter Legion, which is the volunteer organization he mentioned. We primarily pick up trash on 10th Avenue from 57th to 43rd Streets. And we did this fall go out to the DEP site and remove all the brush and growth from around the fence line and pull down vines that were in the fence. In one of the previous designs for this at the last meeting, I did note that there was public storage by the restrooms. And I just didn't see that called out in this plan. So I wanted to ask and make sure that to see if it's still there. I would love for my volunteers to have access. Currently, a lot of my trash pickup supplies live inside my apartment. I would very much like to keep those in an outdoor location that's more easily accessible to all of the volunteers and not like in my living space. So that's what I was asking for.
I was just gonna say noted. I'm almost, I don't know the exact location off the top of it, but I know that it is being incorporated. There's a steel storage bin that we're looking to incorporate on the site and coordinating with DEP. George?
You're muted, George.
I think you're muted, George. It's okay.
There I am. Yeah, it's located on the northern side, more closer to 49th Street. Sort of mid-block or mid-open space in the planting area.
Hey, the reason is because there's less structure there that's existing, and we're happy to we could circle on a plan and even send what it looks like, so you guys have an idea of what that is. That's not a problem.
It's called a steel lockbox, and we have them in a number of the parks, and they come in various lengths. And we try and order one long enough so you can get your biggest shovel in there, and the community usually has the key to it.
So it would be something that's more like a physical box you have to put stuff in, not something that has a door that you could roll items into, because I have a trash cart on wheels. So rolling things in would be like very helpful if possible, instead of having to like lift the whole thing into a container. If that's possible.
I think Alicia can maybe help me answer this, but I think it's part of the agreement with DEP that we cannot have additional structures on the site. Am I correct, Alicia, or am I not?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have to talk about what you're thinking about, Katie. Like, if you're thinking sort of like a garden shed type thing. I think we just.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything big, just preferably something so I have like a laundry cart that all of the supplies and everything live in. So something that could like roll into versus a container that has to be lifted and put inside of.
So I think if you could provide us with the dimensions that you might be looking for, we can see what's available on the market and what might work. But I know that Parks has been looking for something that, like George said, is sort of longer so that it fits shovels and rakes. So, let us know and we'll do our best to find something.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Katie, can I just ask you, do you anticipate that you'll still be doing the litter cleanups maybe 2 years down the road when this project is actually completed?
Yes, I mean, like Chris mentioned, the city budget has taken such a hit, and I anticipate Department of Sanitation to not be able to keep up with this for the next few years. 10th Avenue, if you've been down it lately, is a trash pit, essentially, due to all the cuts in corner basket pickup. And, you know, it's a lot of time to change the social concepts of, oh, let me not throw my trash on the ground. I think this is something that we'll be doing for the foreseeable future.
And would you expand your cleanup efforts to include within this site itself?
Sure.
Steve?
I mean, if you're asking
Katie,
us to adopt it.
No, no, Katie.
Yeah, hold on. Sorry, Steve. The Parks Department needs to be responsible for the maintenance and cleanliness of this open space. The literally the volunteer organization.
No, but we're there generally every morning. Let's say between I don't know, 7 and 10 in the morning. We generally don't have the ability to come back in the afternoons. And if what we have is a group that perhaps is active in the afternoons and could help us keep it clean in the afternoons, that would be a plus.
Well, so we are a volunteer community group. We
Right.
do our cleanups on the weekends, and we primarily focus on streets and sidewalks, and that's it.
And it's once or twice a week, right, Katie?
It's usually once a week. Yeah.
I think, Katie, if you send us or send sort of a dimensions of the materials and supplies you have, we'll do our best to accommodate it on what we're creating there. We have a location. I think it's just making the correct footprint now for what you might need. What would be best, like whether it's a shovel or the cart, et cetera, and we'll do our best to accommodate it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, but we also need to balance that with the people doing volunteer work and maybe gardening within the site. So this needs to be worked out.
Yeah.
So just keep us apprised on the size of that space and how that will work out. Thank you, Katie, and props to you and your Litter Legion. Just so everybody knows, if you can't join her, you can donate to their cause. They have a wish list on Amazon and a GoFundMe. So Katie, maybe you could drop those links in the chat.
Sure.
Since you're doing all that good work for our community.
And we do currently have cleanup kits available for pickup at a lot of local coffee shops. It was actually just promoted on New York One this morning.
Congratulations and thank you again.
Thank you.
Drop those links in the chat. Elka, you're back and we can see you.
I know. I don't know what happened. I think
you got a landline call.
At any rate, so bottom line, thank you, but we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more fence. So Steve, what do you think?
You know, we really have hashed this question out with our commissioner and it's gone through PDC. I frankly don't see it changing.
Steve, can I, Elka, just on context, the fence at 20th Street Park, there was much discussion and debate over that as well, because that was initially proposed as 4 feet. Clement Clark Moore, there was push to reduce the height of that fence, and that fence has remained. I believe 20th Street ended at 6 feet with the base that it has.
I don't think so.
Sally?
Yeah. So you're right. I've been holding my tongue because this was a problem for us from day one. The plan was always the 8 feet. We went in with wanting an 8-foot fence, and we had, it's like reliving the whole thing. We negotiated and we wound up with a 5-foot. The part of the, I don't know if you can go through this again, Steve. I know that the 5-foot, the 4-foot is the measurement for city parks. Somehow we got to 5, and there seems to be that leeway. Since this is DEP, I don't understand that connection that you're sticking with the 5, but I do want to say to the people that are concerned, our park has now been open. It'll be 2 years this summer, although 10 months of that has been, COVID. But everything we feared about the 5-foot fence, we figured we couldn't argue anymore. I mean, it was going to be 5 feet. There was no way we were getting our 8 feet. So we just went with the 5 feet. They came up from 4 feet. We've been living with 5 feet, and we honestly haven't had any problems. I mean, it has not been a problem. We figured if it becomes problematic and we're calling the police every other week, and it's an issue when it's trash and there's people sleeping in the park, we'll just confront it again.
Sally, unfortunately, this is heroin use,
Chris,
and you're not going to call a police department. No, Jeffrey.
No, we're not
comparing apples to
Christopher,
oranges.
Mr. LeBron, we are not having crosstalk. Sally is speaking to a specific issue. I asked for context on 20th Street Park. Bring your hand up and we can continue the conversation. Sally, and then back to Elka.
Okay, so thank you. The thing too is that we had an experience with Hell's Kitchen Park. Again, it's a long time ago. And I don't think that you can really compare Hell's Kitchen, this area, to, I think you're in Chelsea. Is that where you are? And lucky you. But I just, especially on 10th Avenue between 10th and 11th, we have a lot of social services, many homeless in this neighborhood, besides the drug problems that we have. It just makes no sense. And so I understand that the current commissioner likes 5 feet fence.
4 feet,
This 4 feet. We're going to have a new commissioner as soon as we get a new mayor next month. And I assume it's not going to be built before the end of this year. So, I mean, I'm keeping can we just keep it as an open question? If you can't make that commitment, can at least be a question mark as to the height of that fence, and maybe revisit that when we have a new administration.
I can't make that commitment, but I'm serving under the current commissioner. So, we have a plan which has gone through the review process. I mean, you're free certainly to do whatever you wish later on, but this is the design that he has signed off on.
Okay. So can it be changed once it's been signed off?
Please, Elka, don't ask me that question.
Okay. Okay.
Expensive. Change orders are expensive. Also, I totally understand and I'm supportive of a taller fence, but if we don't get these construction documents in the works, and let's get them approved under this administration, so that way actually things are moving forward to the next administration and we're not caught up in the shuffle of a new administration in a sense. So,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Elka, and then go 2 more hands to the committee. Sorry, go ahead.
Just one question. So Steve, if there is only a 5-foot fence, is there going to be a staff there all day? Since, we had asked and you supplied a place for them to be, is there going to be staff the entire day?
Well, that is our hope, because having the bathroom and the maintenance space right there provides us with that opportunity. But I can't really predict, especially with the budget being in flux. I mean, Katie referred to the sanitation budget. The Parks Department budget didn't fare very well either in the FY21 budget adoption. We lost 14% of our budget, $84 million. And we lost a lot of our seasonal staff. This would probably be this probably would not be a year-round position. It probably would be a seasonal position. And at the moment, I can't even tell you whether we're going to have. We didn't have any of our, for the most part, we didn't have any of our seasonal workers last year, and I can't even tell you right now whether we're going to have them for this year. So it is certainly our hope that we can have somebody, what we call a fixed post at this location, because we do have that ability with the bathrooms and that maintenance space that's being built for us inside the HPD building.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Elka. Let's see. Marty, and then Leslie, and then Janine, if you want to bring Catherine Lafferty over from the attendees.
All right, gotcha.
Marty?
Jeffrey, we've been hearing, thank you, Jeffrey. We've been hearing this conversation about 6 to 7 foot fence now for 5 years more. We have pleaded with Steve a number of times, and he's heard our pleas. I am upset that our community is being disregarded at its request for larger fences. It is unacceptable, and whatever letter we write should be very strong on this point.
Thank you. Leslie?
Marty just took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, I was going to say whatever letter we write, that should be the one point, the highlight of the strength of words. And if I can ask Steve a question, Steve, when you go back and you say the community was very, very strong on this point or adamant on this point, what is the response to the no, we're not giving the high fence? What is, I'm curious of the response back at Central.
Well, the response, we started out with a 4-foot fence, which is which has become our standard, and what the commissioner decided together with the DP was that we could go to 5 feet. He feels very strongly that the taller fences actually inhibit the use of the park, that they keep people out, that they send the wrong signal. He has a very distinct philosophy about how to make parks more welcoming and inviting, and he has been very strong on lowering fences in parks all over the city, in Harlem, downtown, everywhere. So, and as Sally mentioned, we have generally not had an issue with the lower fences.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Steve. Any other, let's see, Kat, you're here. Sorry about that. Catherine?
Hi everyone. I'm Catherine Lafferty. I'm a gardener in Hell's Kitchen Park and a steering committee member of the Clinton Community Garden. And I lead community cleanups on Sundays with Eric Botcher and have since August. And we have an iteration where we do planting on the medians. So I am so excited by this most recent plan that it's so green. And I just have a couple asks. One would be, I know in Matthew's Palmer playground, there's a maintenance shed sort of built in to the restrooms. And I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, obviously, but
no, I have an answer.
Okay. My thought was just perhaps there could be a little bit of storage space.
Yes.
For rakes and things in there.
Yes. Well, there will be space for the Parks Department's tools and some equipment, for a place for our staff. This is one thing that we negotiated for. It's not just the 2 bathrooms. It's also having the space for our own M&O staff, which, as I mentioned to Elka earlier, would allow us to have a fixed post. Now, what I need to explore is how much space do we actually need, and maybe, as I think what you're alluding to, maybe there's space there as well for some of the tools and equipment that the volunteers would use. So I think that's a legit question.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, I wanted to ask, I just wanted to also present this idea that maybe this could be a space for composting, since you're going to have these wonderful recycling and garbage bins to be able to launch the new space with composting. I'm just throwing that out there because we don't have composting in Hell's Kitchen Park, and it's very popular. We've relaunched it in Matthews Palmer. So that's just another idea. And thirdly, I just want to ask about the entrances there. Am I correct? Did I interpret it correctly that there's one on 10th and then there's an entrance, a public entrance on 48th as well?
Correct. There's an entrance on the western end of 48th, and then there's another one at the intersection of 10th and 40th, sort of a corner angled entrance on the corner there as well. That's proposed.
Okay. I just want to voice my concern of the traffic that zooms up 48th. And I also just want to voice my concern of the graffiti that ends up, especially this past summer, on the fence, the rear fence of the site. And so I'm very excited by the plan and how green it is, and all of the seating. and that there's a water element. It looks wonderful, but I just think we have to be cognizant of how we can work as a community, volunteers, as well as people who work for the agencies, to take care of it so it doesn't get graffitied and vandalized. So thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks,
If I could just mention, Jeffrey, our staff has been directed to remove graffiti whenever possible. We're not supposed to allow it to remain there. Are you telling me that it's on the rear fence now?
That area had been painted blue in the spring, and now it's fully graffitied.
All right, I'll bring that to their attention. We're probably the ones who painted it, because we're constantly painting over graffiti whenever we come upon it.
You definitely are the one, so thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Steve. Any other comments? I see no other hands in the public. I'd like to wrap this up. I'm not sure the Parks Department is coming to us with an update. One of those based on our feedback, one of those based on a technicality. We've talked a lot about the fence. We've heard a lot from the Parks Department for years about the fence. Does the committee feel we need a letter about the fence?
I make a motion to write a letter highlighting and emphasizing strongly the years of emphasis on the height of the fence and Parks' inability to use their ears to hear us.
Is that on the item, or is this a philosophical letter, like a policy letter, or is it on the item at hand?
On this particular public green space, over the last 5 years, we've opined on Parks, not only to reconsider, but to come back to us with a plan on a higher perimeter fence. They've ignored us.
Okay.
I'd like to point that out.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
So we're going to send another letter on this topic alone, just to clarify, about us wanting an 8 foot, like a higher fence than 5 feet, which is above the standard 4 feet of the fence.
Well, right now it's 5 feet.
Right, which is above your standard 4 foot fence.
Yes.
And we are seeking it to be higher than 5 feet.
Yeah,
correct. If we can highlight the fact that Parks is 4 feet and the 4 DEP sites are 5 feet, and that Hell's Kitchen Park across the street is 7 or 8 feet, that would be prevalent there. But additionally, we also do appreciate that Parks came to us and did the presentation, and that we look forward to continuing the conversation. And
I want to be very clear on the committee's understanding of where they are in the process. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong here. You guys are in the final phase of construction documents, which you will then certify and use to go to bid. And construction companies will then bid to build this park for us, this open space for us, correct?
Well, that would be the normal process, but as I tried to explain earlier,
that TDC has to get in the way.
No. There is a discussion going on now with the HPD and its developer as to what is the best approach we can take to make sure that we get the park built as quickly as possible. And we may end up doing something which is maybe off the beaten track. But so we may not follow the regular process, but we will keep you posted as these discussions continue.
Okay. Any other questions on the motion?
If I could just ask that maybe as you hit us over the head over the fence, maybe you could acknowledge that we did in fact incorporate many of your suggestions about the park, about the site.
You know, in general, I think parks should be taking community input and not simply having a Procrustean rule. But also in terms of the bidding, it's easy enough to put in an alternate for the higher fence.
Okay, any other questions on the motion? I don't know how to call this. Usually I do, because I don't know if everybody's in unison on this. All in favor of another letter about a higher fence?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Or present not eligible? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you to the committee. Thank you to Steve and team, Alex, Leslie, Alicia, everybody. Thank you all. Steve, I think it would be really helpful to make sure that we're kept in the loop about that HPD discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to be working with the Speaker's office, so you will absolutely be kept in the loop.
Okay, great. Thank you, Parks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Final item. Thanks, Nick. Sorry, I didn't call you in also. Janine, do we know who's here yet from Balsley Park? Is anybody here from Balsley Park?
Yes, so I have Mike. I'm going to bring him over. Michael Curley.
So you guys may all recall early summertime, we took up Balsley Park, which is it's a public space. I don't know how to define it. It's not really a park. It's not a POPS. It's at the southeast corner of 57th and 9th Avenue. And I believe let's see, Mike, you're here. We're here to hear an update about, there was some construction that had to be done and some other conversations that were happening about that space. So the floor is yours, sir. Unmute.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Good.
All right, awesome. I've been having some microphone trouble lately, so that's great. So my name is Michael Curley. I'm an urban planner at Ackerman LLP. So we represent the Sheffield and we'll be preparing the kiosk renewal application for Balsley Park on their behalf. So I just want to give you guys a quick update on the recent maintenance and improvement work that's been completed at the park, as well as a timeline for work that's anticipated in the near future. So over the past several months, the Sheffield has spent approximately $62,000 clearing fallen trees, replacing concrete to remove tripping hazards, and repairing gates and fences to improve security. The frequency of security patrols at the park has also been increased. This spring, once the snow is melted and the park vendome is able to remove their protective sheds, several additional improvements are planned, including replacing trees and performing heavy pruning, extensive repainting of equipment and concrete, further maintenance and improvements to fencing and gates, installation of additional lighting, and installation of new security cameras. So Mark Morrison, a landscape architect, has been retained to make further improvements to the park as well. We're planning to proceed with the kiosk renewal application in the coming months, and we'll certainly let the board know once the application has been filed with the Department of City Planning. The Sheffield is committed to fulfilling its obligation to maintain Balsley Park, and we look forward to continued collaboration with the committee and community board for it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I wish all of our updates were that efficient and punctual. I really appreciate that. Any questions from the committee? Blake.
Yeah, I can't remember if we had written a letter about this park or not last time, but my feedback was just, I think it needs more paint. Often, I don't think the paint has been upkept very well as the gate.
Yeah.
I think might be improved. It's really like a very uninviting gate that looks like sort of a jail sort of gate. As well as just the ongoing cleanliness of the park has been an issue. So I don't know if there's anything from like a park design perspective that might help with the upkeep of the park. So those are just thoughts. And then the question was just, what the timeline looks like for completing the work on the park.
Yeah, so some improvements have been made already, but I mean the rest, the planting of new trees and, painting, that won't happen until the spring. So I mean, there's not a set deadline. I could certainly get back to you, with something a little bit more concrete. But yeah, spring is the general timeline that we're working off of.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Leslie.
Hi, Michael. I'm just sorry. Can you just
Hello.
position with the Sheffield again, or your position with this? I'm sorry, just so we can, because we did have a bunch.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm an urban planner. I work at Ackerman LLP, which is a law firm. So we're representing the Sheffield for their kiosk renewal application. So the kiosk that's in the park, every 3 years, as you guys are more than aware, needs to be renewed. So we'll be helping them with that effort.
So do you have anything to do with what Blake was kind of saying? Do you have anything to do with the general overall maintenance with it, or you guys are just handling this one specific part? Because if you are, I want to address some things there. If you're not, then you're not the person to go to. I'm just trying to ascertain what it is.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm here to be, a liaison with the Sheffield. So if there are specific, questions, I'm happy to. I may not be able to answer everything, but I'm happy to relay those back to the Sheffield.
Yeah, because I think, we had someone on from the board of the Sheffield a few months ago. Jeffrey, wasn't it a few months ago?
Yeah, Ronnie couldn't make it tonight, so that's why they knew we wanted an update. So
I think
I'm Ronnie's fill-in.
I think we keep. I mean, I live on 55th, so I'm pretty close to it, and we keep asking for an update. And this has been a point of contention, Michael, between the residents, specifically of Park Vendôme, which is right adjacent to there, but in residents in general, and the responsibility of the Sheffield to keep this up, which we know is your responsibility. And it's been this push and pull for, I was going to say months, but really years. And I know there are some people on this call that are very concerned about it. So I don't know really what more you can tell us, because every time you guys come on, we'll get you an update. Let me go back and see. Let's see if we could repaint. And I got to tell you, it's like it's ringing hollow now a little bit. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we don't know who else we can go to with this.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, I do want to reiterate that, some improvements have already been made recently. So just in terms of, they did do a tree cleanup, tree branch cleanup this past fall. There have been, improvements to the concrete, which was, kind of a tripping hazard and, crumbling and like kind of potholes in places previously. And then there have been some repairs made to, the gates and fences. I mean, additional improvements are on the way, but I would need to get back to you about kind of the exact timeline for that.
And I also think it's just not improvements, but I think it's just upkeep. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just maintenance of a park. When it's not maintained and no one's watching it, it deteriorates. So I understand you're citing these specific, like, I don't want to say capital improvements, but you know what I mean? Improvements and not general upkeep. There's someone in the chat. I know that.
No, Leslie, I've got it. I'll get through that, but I want to go through. I don't believe there's anybody else from the committee. I'm going to go to Anita, and then we'll do. There's some just facts in the chat or statements in the chat. Anita, are you here with us?
I am here. This is like deja vu for me, because the last time Balsley Park had to renew their kiosk license was when the Park Vendôme said no, because the park was in such disrepair. And here we are again. You're ready to renew the kiosk license, and again, the park is in such disrepair. Now, when you talk about the tree branch cleanup, what happened was that there was a storm and a big tree fell into the park. Luckily, the park was closed and the tree didn't fall on anybody, but the tree was of such a major size, it had to be cut into small pieces in order to be removed. Now, I was in the park, looking at the park, and the seedlings that I've been complaining about for years, still have not been removed. And one particular seedling is so close to a tree that it's probably going to kill the tree. It really does need to be removed. And when I've brought it up to the Sheffield president, Frank, in the past, when he was president, I don't know who's president right now of the Sheffield board, he said, oh, you know, I kind of like those seedlings. Let's see how they progress and bloom. But that is not part of the punch list. And that is not the punch list that JD Nolan asked for back in 2016. So we're very frustrated because the park is not being maintained the way it's supposed to. When we last met, we discussed the that one little grassy knoll, that sort of round hump in the middle of the park, because it really needs sod. And usually what the Sheffield does is just, they just put down seed. It really needs to be, the soil needs to be freshened up so that grass can grow there. I was there yesterday and it was covered in snow, so it looks better than normal. And I do understand that the Park Vendôme has a shed that is going through the playground, but that shed should be removed this summer. So, but it's still not blocking the trees that have to be replanted in the park. And I understand you can't start planting till maybe April or May, but I am disappointed that you are showing up at this meeting and not submitting a site plan to the committee of what your intended work is.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. You know, we can certainly provide a site plan in the future. So, you know, we have retained a landscape architect, so they'll be able to provide, you know, in the coming weeks, you know, coming months, they'll be able to provide an updated site plan for the proposed scope of work.
It's just, you know, this meeting, I'm sorry, Jeffrey, really, excuse me, I'm sorry, but you delayed this meeting. It was supposed to be November. They were supposed to present in December, and then it was January. No. Now it's February.
No, that's not true. We put this on the agenda purposefully this month. It was not meant to come any sooner.
But, okay, but it's still plenty of months to get a site plan together. And Ronnie's been talking about it for a very long time. And the fact that you've been given all this time and you show up at this meeting without, you know, just giving us a verbal intent, I'm disappointed. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Anita. We appreciate your advocacy here. Just some comments in the chat. You know, folks, if you recall the history, the Sheffield does not abut this park. This was an agreement for the Sheffield to maintain this place out of a zoning change of a previous owner and developer, if I'm not mistaken. And so they are tasked with maintaining it because of a land use action in the past. This has been going on for years. A lot of this is not new, hence a lot of the frustrations from the immediate community. We've heard Leslie on the committee, Anita, Karen in the chat has raised this as well. You know, I'm frustrated, but also hearing that there's been a little bit of progress. I recognize that's not a lot of progress. You know, there's been a lot of discussion on other groups taking over, but Alan, to your point, my only thing is like it's codified by the city. So there needs to be some like violation teeth here that like who does that? I'm not really sure. It was city planning that made this deal all those years ago when that happened. You know, the Sheffield's expected to do this, but a lot of folks have a financial interest in the park, the buildings immediately around the park. So, you know, they're Anita, I appreciate that, but they did do the concrete repairs, which was the main thrust of the meeting back in the summer. I'll leave it at that. Does the committee feel there's a need for a letter here? And to whom should a letter go? Alan?
About a letter to the Sheffield.
whoever's supposed to be taking care of this. I mean, you know, we write to agencies, what does the agency do? So maybe we should just write to the board of the Sheffield or whoever or something. We're tired of their procrastinations on this.
Saying,
take care of the park. I don't know, you know.
Okay, I saw Marty's hand.
I don't feel the need for a letter on this. This is an argument between two buildings, and it isn't something that we do them a service by insisting on periodic follow-ups, but it isn't something that we should be writing a letter about, I don't think.
Any other, Blake, there's a hand.
Yeah, well, something I'm confused about is what the connection is between this improvement to the park and the kiosk permit. You know, can you clarify that piece?
Yeah, so previously, you know, there were violations identified by the Department of Buildings, you know, on the park, you know, some of the things I mentioned earlier in terms of tripping hazards. So, you know, we're hoping to get those violations cleared up, you know, prior to, you know, the processing of the application. So we understand that, you know, these issues have been going on and, you know, want to get them cleared up, but also want to do that ahead of this upcoming application.
Yes, so, you know, I would agree with Alan that I think a letter to the Sheffield might be in order, and maybe the letter could specifically request the site plan for this park because, you know, to the point about improvements, I think it was just like the legal minimum that was done, you know, like I'm sure those branches had to by law maybe be cleared and, you know, the tripping violations probably were, you know, put the Sheffield at legal liability, but there's no visible sense of improvement. You know, like I wouldn't even have known that any improvements had been done. So I think, you know, the letter should at least ask for a site plan and a timeline on progress on it.
Thank you, Blake. Leslie?
I just want
Was that,
to,
Blake, or is that, I'm sorry, Blake, was that, are you good?
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Leslie, go ahead.
that's okay. I just want to correct Marty. Marty, this is not a building versus building issue at all. In fact, that's the furthest thing. This is a public park or a privately kept public park. It's a public space, and it's just that the Sheffield is just responsible for its upkeep. And it just happens to butt against the Park Vendome, but this is all of, I mean, Jeffrey, you live kind of, well, you live a little bit more west, but it's more for the whole area. This is not a private, like we're not interjecting in a private dispute here.
Kiosk renewal is not in front of us, is it?
No, it's not. It's a good point.
I mean, if it were, then we should be writing a letter saying that the renewal should be denied. And I don't know how that goes. This is a privately owned public park. Somebody got some serious benefits out of having a privately owned public park set up. That's part of the history, as I understand it.
Marty throws an interesting technical hook on the table that if this was an application for the kiosk, we could deny it, sort of a deny unless a la our liquor license applications, which would actually have potentially some teeth.
Yeah. Jeffrey, maybe the letter should just come out of the district office rather than a formal letter for, you know, that has to be voted on. Maybe just come out as an admin letter or something.
I guess. I don't know that we've taken a position so that it can be admin or like my understanding of an admin letter is it has to either restate a position we've done or it's just sort of, Jeanine, is there sort of a definition on that?
No, not that I know of.
I mean, Alan, I don't disagree. It just
instead of like a community board, you know, formal, you know, that kind, maybe just a little push, just a little nudge from the district office or something.
I want to make sure that we are giving the district office the appropriate sort of confines to work in. You know what I mean?
Okay, an admin letter in this case, I'm guessing hear me out. An admin letter would be a request to find out what the kiosk permit is, when it is to be renewed, that we have some concerns about the park, and we could express the concerns in an admin letter, but say that we don't know when it is that it's coming up, and we would like to be informed. That would be an admin letter
That sounds good.
with an inquiry.
Excuse me 1 second.
Hold on,
Gentlemen.
Chris, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
So for context, this park was developed and identified when Park Vendome had sold its air rights to the Sheffield. And in that sale, the Sheffield was responsible for the maintenance and upkeep on the private end for this public space. The public space has been closed for quite some time. The reasoning behind it was maintenance and upkeep, as well as alleged vagrancy. This has been for quite some time. Park Vendome did not. Okay, well, whatever it is, the Sheffield's responsible.
There was a reason, to be clear, if I'm not mistaken, there was a rezoning, an upzoning of the Sheffields, which is what the handoff for this was.
Thank you. And so I that space is the only green space in that area. As we know, across the street from there, there was much scaffolding for quite some time at that historic building. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was in front of the Hell's Kitchen Zoning and Land Use Committee for its renovation. And so we also have a high school there. At one point, we also had Beacon High School in the area. And so that was the only green space for those students, those teachers, and people that lived in that neighborhood outside of that general plaza for the Sheffield. JD has focused on making sure that this space opens up because of the limited green space, as well as the utility overarching. We did send out a letter last time. I believe it was to ensure that the Sheffield and Vendome came to us with movement on how this was going to be maintained. And so I do appreciate that there is movement and effort in the positive end. But potentially there should be an administrative letter, but also I'm kind of curious as to who that letter was CC'd to. Do we know? From what was it, November or October?
I don't know. I can't recall.
I guess we have to look into the records, because I believe we did vote on a letter.
I believe we did back in the summer.
Okay, so it wasn't October. But we did vote on a letter. So I believe that the motion should not only just be for an administrative letter, but that this board reiterate what it stated, but also highlighting its appreciation that both bodies came forward with a progress in identifying the upkeep of this green space.
So I want to really encourage a resolution on this for the purpose of this meeting. There's been a suggestion that it could be an admin letter, sort of seeking to understand the timeline of the kiosk and how that relates to what that means in terms of renewal. I mean,
Jeffrey, does Michael know when the renewal is? Would he know, or?
Yeah, so there's no definite timeline on the renewal yet. You know, we're hoping to get it going in the next couple months. Yeah, but nothing definite. As you're well aware, I mean, we have to submit kind of preliminary materials to the city, and then there will be some coordination for, a few months before the actual application is filed. So it probably won't be before the community board for, oops, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying it'll be coming up soon in a few months. I mean, we're going to see this, I guess.
Yeah, it'll come back to the community board, but it probably won't be for several months.
Brett, is this something to further the issue closer to a close here?
It's exactly what this is. So what I would suggest, given it sounds like we just don't have enough information about the background to make a solid informed decision. And it sounds like if we might have a few months for any kind of application, I suggest that we have the board office do some research, come back, let us know what the facts are, what the background is. JD has been very instrumental in a lot of the past conversations. We let him know also that we would like to have that informed conversation about coming up with our resolution or whatever we come up with, and bring it back next month more informed.
So I do not think this is an appropriate admin letter. I think this is us taking a position and making a request of an entity. So I just want to clarify that for sort of, I don't know, that's a parliamentary concern of mine, that I don't want to ask that board to do an admin letter on something that they tell us then they can't because we haven't taken an appropriate position on it already. So it sounds like we want to ask the Sheffield the specific timeline as it relates to the kiosk, the timeline as it relates to the specific repairs they're looking to make as it relates to the concrete, the fence, the pruning of the trees, the new trees for spring. We should get a planting schedule. We should request a planting schedule from the landscape architect, that is Mark Morrison. And that we recognize the work that's been done already and we appreciate that, but there is a considerable way to go to get us to a state of good repair. Alan?
And a maintenance program. What do they propose as a maintenance program?
I would make a motion capturing all those points for a letter.
Is there a second?
I'm still not sure that all those points aren't an admin letter, that they're all requests for information.
I guess I'm just nervous because we've never done it before, Marty.
There was a second.
Second, there was a second.
Yeah, there was. Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Marty, you're still concerned it could be admin.
You want to write, I mean, if you want to write a letter, that's fine, but we don't, as Brett said, and he's right, we don't have the information to write a sensible letter. We're asking for information.
No, right, I think we're asking for a more concrete, specific timeline to be shared with the board, thanks to Michael's updates that we received verbally tonight, but there's other parts of the community that want more detail from it. And we could get that in the form of a request. I mean, this to me seems like it would be a letter we would typically pass as the committee. So for requesting information. Any other comments on the motion?
Call the question.
All in favor? You could say that louder, Mr. LeBron. All in favor?
I lost my voice, sorry. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained or present not eligible? Okay. Alan, you had new business. Was it something you want to formally put on an agenda, or did you want to take it up tonight?
For a future agenda.
Okay, so I think that we need to invite the, like, Parks has an art division, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think Janine, can we put that down on the list for consideration? Perfect.
Is it possible to also invite, along with Parks' art division, any entities that fall within CB4 for theater, so that we can create a cross-pollination of conversation between the two?
I think the key is for us to understand the Parks Department's ability to allow for arts in the park. So I'd rather get information from the Parks. I would want to get information from the Parks Department first, that if it's even possible. Also, open culture is a whole new thing that a lot of theater companies are able to explore now, which is a new program the administration has announced, and that is actively being rolled out. And there's a couple of sites in Community Board 4 that will be host to that. So Chris, I don't know if we could, I don't want to mix those too soon before we know what the Parks Department can offer. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I would just love to attend the ACES meeting if they do invite and make sure that we get all our notes.
I mean, do you want to take this to ACES? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I think that we hold it in the parks. You know.
This is in the parks, in the parks.
That was called a boomerang. That was called a boomerang.
We'll
I
show up. We'll
appreciate
show up to your meeting. They will show up to our meeting. Something like that.
Attendance has been amazing for CB, so you know you're gonna have a lot of us there.
All right, everybody. If there's no further business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, stay safe. Alan, nice hug.
Second it. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank
There it
you.
is.
Hug, Alan.
It's the mug. The mug.